Well, Sundar, thank you so much for joining us at Signal. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. We have a lot to talk about, so why don't we just jump right in? Just about 6 weeks or so ago, you had your big developer conference, Google I/O, and you gave your keynote address, and it was really full of AI-related announcements. And that's a big theme for this conference: the impact of artificial intelligence and related technologies on business. You announced a number of things and developments at Google, which has been a leader in the space. How do you think this technology is going to play out in the future? And what else is coming near term from Google that we should be aware of?
Well, first of all, it's good to be with you, John, and good to be at Signal. Thanks for having me. Real pleasure. Uh, you're right. At IO, we spoke a lot about how we are using AI to be more helpful across our products. The thing that excites me, if I step back, is uh, overall, I think we are in this journey of getting computers to understand the world the way we humans understand the world. And we perceive the world in many different ways. We see things, we hear things, we read things, and so on. So that's what we've been trying to do deeply with AI, and we're making progress across all of that. So in some ways, you followed search for a long time. If you look at, originally we did search without actually really deeply understanding the meaning of what's in web pages, right? We use keywords, we find how often they are, we find who else links to them, and so on. But now, actually, we are getting to deeper language understanding and image understanding. And so, all that overall, for me, just I'm above all excited that we can do things like search in a much deeper way. So, you can imagine being able to naturally converse, maybe a few years down the line, particularly with AR. You can imagine with your child, you're interested in learning about T-Rex. You can ask for T-Rex, you can pull it up in your room, and you can have a conversation with T-Rex and spend 15 minutes fun that way learning about it. All that is something really we can do. And so, that's what we are trying to do. Or if you're walking around in a place and you want information around what you're seeing, it's more natural at your fingertips in a deeper way. And so that's the core underlying theme across all of this. So how do we use AI to deeper understand the world and bring it to you in a natural, seamless way? So you will see it in search, in Assistant, in Google Workspace. But I'm interested above all to actually through Google Cloud to take all that innovation and give it to any company so that they can solve problems in the context of whatever they are trying to solve.
It sounds like it's becoming more conversational. I think a lot of us have now gotten to the point where we're comfortable, asking short, kind of bursty queries with, spoken word as opposed to typing it in. That's something that's changed pretty
Yeah.
dramatically in the last 5 years. What you're suggesting is that you're going to talk to a computing device, whether it's a phone or your glasses or an ambient computing that might be in a room around you, in a more conversational tone.
Yeah, and I think today you're right. We've come a long way in terms of being able to talk, but there are often these frustrating moments because we've kind of gotten aspects of conversation. You can correct what you said. Sometimes it doesn't really understand you, and the work we are doing is like taking it to the next level where it kind of in a deeper way understands what you're saying, and that gives rise to a whole new set of capabilities and the conversational way by which you can interact, as well as if you see things and you want to ask questions about like what you've just seen in front of you. How does that work? So it's bringing all of that together.
Are there technologies you're excited about that have some near term, say next year or two, impact that you think are going to break out that Google is paying attention to? I mean, you see headlines about quantum computing or blockchain. Are these things that you think are going to change the world soon?
We are big believers in the potential of quantum, and we're investing deeply. I would say it is you're going to see more impact in a 5 to 10 year time frame, not in the next 2 year time frame. There, so we have clear goals, and it's still, but it's in the medium to long term. Blockchain is something, look, I'm very excited by. I think anytime you have kind of a standards-based innovation, which can generally apply across everything, that is something I think, the web itself is an example of that. So I think blockchain can be that foundational, at least the potential of it. So that is something, definitely excited by, and we are seeing where we can help contribute to the ecosystem.
Um, some folks in the world of blockchain and decentralized media have said one of the things that's best about it is because it's decentralized, it will loosen the grip of large technology platforms like Google. Do you see that as a potential threat, or is it something that you will embrace because it allows you to extend your model?
I think I would view it as any innovation is something you want to embrace and innovate. Yes, there may be some things that is disruptive to you, but also creates new opportunities. Now, take cloud, for example. You can view cloud as we are taking all the capabilities by which we are running Google over 20 years and providing it to everyone else. But it's a new opportunity as well. And so I view today, today we take something like Chromium, which powers Chrome, and make it available as an open source rendering engine to others. And so that's how I think about the world. And I think it's innovative. It'll allow us to do new applications, payments working well, or other smart contracts working well. I think allows us to serve our users better too. So I see these as positive developments.
I want to switch for a minute here to the topic of advertising. This is a conference, a P&G conference, and of course, as the world's largest advertiser, they're very interested in the space. Um, and it's become, I think, for many, a little confusing. It seems like all the big players are, fighting with each other a little bit. Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, the death of the cookie. These have been very much in the headlines lately. Um, what's your take on that? Is this dream of identity-based marketing where you know exactly who you're talking to, you can create exactly the right message for that person at the right time, which is driven by all the sort of marvelous mechanics of data collection that have been built up through Google, Facebook, Amazon, and others. Is that going to change dramatically? And if so, how?
It's a great question. It's a moment of change and inflection, I think. First of all, I do think there's intense competition amongst all these companies. When I think about what are users constantly have evolving privacy expectations. It's always been true. It'll continue to evolve, and we all have to stay one step ahead of it. I think advertisers at the end of the day care about reaching the right users and wanting a sense for whether their efforts are effective. And so I don't think these two goals are necessarily at odds with each other. You can solve this in a privacy preserving way. Now I think about encryption. Compared to many years ago, today we all communicate using encrypted messaging. And we figured out a way by which technologically you can solve for privacy while my message has to go through public infrastructure and come through the other side. Similarly, computer science and AI will allow us to do a lot of this in a more privacy preserving way. It's a bit counterintuitive. And so, for example, when we do in Google Keyboard with federated learning, we don't need to send what you're typing into the cloud. It stays on device, but we can constantly update the model in the cloud to get at the latest, best model for Google Keyboard. In Google Maps, when you look at the busyness times for restaurants, we again do this using a technique called differential privacy. So we are taking this kind of techniques and applying it, and that's what our privacy sandbox effort is about, to figure out how we can do this. But I do think, look, this is a big ecosystem. I would expect industry leaders like P&G to play a role in shaping some of this. Users, regulators, publishers all have a voice in this, but I think we all collectively need to solve for privacy And that has to be an important goal. So we need to lean into where users are headed and stay ahead of that expectations. But I think there is real opportunity to do this in a privacy preserving way.
I just want to follow up with that. Again, the model that has developed on the web, which critics have called surveillance capitalism, has raised when that happens and the public becomes aware. It's not long after that legislative bodies start to take up regulatory policy discussions, and that's certainly much in the air now. Um, so I want to ask this a little differently. Do you think that the model that we've all grown accustomed to, of a data-driven, identifier-driven marketing ecosystem, is that going to evolve to something else, or are you saying that we can still know who we're talking to as marketers, but we'll do it in a privacy compliant way?
The latter, I think. I don't think users do not want to be profiled or tracked individually with many people building models of that. And I don't see the reason it needs to work that way. Again, as an advertiser, you're just trying to make sure the people who really need to know about your products or whoever your intended audience is receiving the message, and you want some feedback that it's all working, right? And I think we can engineer and solve for it in a privacy preserving way. And I do think that there is change, but I think it's where the world is heading. I think there'll be a lot of debate about it, but I think the changes will be beneficial to everyone in the long run.
What do you make of all of the uh, legislation, much of it privacy related, as we've been discussing, that is starting to, take over the headlines now? 5 pieces of legislation last month being introduced, in Congress, targeting big tech. How should this audience think about all of this new regulation, and how is Google responding?
Well, two things. Look, technology is playing an increasingly important role, in society and touching many aspects of, how things work. So it seems to be natural to me as an evolution of the industry. So if you look at healthcare today, Google works with partners in healthcare. You have deep regulations like HIPAA, which we all abide by. And so it makes sense to me technology industry needs its set of rules, be it around privacy, things like GDPR, and hopefully there's federal privacy legislation in the US. Things like AI, safety, security, privacy, and so on. Content moderation. So I think that part seems natural to me, though figuring out the right answers will take some time, and that's part of it. The second part of it is, as large companies, I think it's also right that there is scrutiny. We've been on this journey for a while, and the way I approach it is, it makes sense there is scrutiny, and we are also looking for. So, for example, in Europe, we've been in deep situations where we have engaged constructively with regulators and figuring out solutions. Maybe a choice screen on Android, or so we are interested in finding out solutions that work as well. So that's how I would approach it, I think. But to me, it seems like a natural evolution of where things are.
Is there a specific regulatory change that you would advocate for here in the United States?
A few things. I think first of all, I'm worried about a patchwork of different privacy frameworks,
Like there's
and
so
I
many
hope there
different
is
state regimes, for example.
yeah. And what happens is, just imagine if you're a startup, right? You have to now, we take this for granted, but imagine a future internet startup which has to comply with 50 different frameworks as you're building it as a small company. That's very onerous. And so I think the wrong legislation can also entrench, like you see in other industries as well. So I think it's important that we think through regulation right way, but we would support federal privacy legislation. Content moderation, I think all of us would benefit from better rules. I think there are definitely good provisions in Congress around accountability, transparency, a way for users to have due processes. I think there are interesting proposals, maybe something around content moderation. Tackling aspects of AI which are fast getting implemented, for example, facial recognition. Having regulation around, what is sanctioned use of facial recognition. Today as Google, we've decided not to offer APIs in that area because we see it's fraud. But these are all areas where we would welcome clear rules of the road. Even areas like M&A, we'd be happy for there to be thoughtful evolutions of how things work. As a company, we self-regulate in something like M&A for the past many years. We do internal analysis before we think about buying something, and so we wouldn't be opposed to legislation in these important areas.
I wanted to ask you about YouTube. It's been, obviously it had an extraordinary year, I imagine, because of the pandemic. A lot of people were watching a lot of YouTube. It has a huge install base. Give us a little bit of a snapshot of YouTube, and how its last year has been, and what you see coming for YouTube in the next year.
No, I think it's a powerful platform, and it's definitely seen a lot of growth. Um, Things which I'm excited by. Well, maybe let me talk about something I'm personally excited by how I use YouTube a lot, and it's a focus for the YouTube team as well. Is I think it's an extraordinary platform for learning in a way. I don't think people use it that way. There's no person I talk to who hasn't used YouTube on a constant basis to learn something new. So I think the learning experiences in YouTube can be much better and deeper, and so that's a journey we are on. Bigger trends. There's a lot of interest in commerce. E-commerce has been a big, uh, has evolved a lot through last year. Bringing shopping experiences in a native way to the platform, where creators and merchants can make that experience much more work much better for users on YouTube. I think that's a big opportunity the team is thinking about. Mobile creation, is just a real opportunity. So we are experimenting with the Shorts format, but
Yeah.
early days. But we are seeing lots of traction. You will see us invest in it, roll out, and experiment with it through the course of this year. Um, Content responsibility is still our biggest area, and want to appreciate the partnership and the thought leadership from Mark Pritchard and P&G here as we work through brand safety, et cetera, to make sure we are a best-in-class platform. Finally, I think living room. People are watching it on TVs more and more, and so how do we take that experience and evolve it? Also happens to be an exciting focus area as well.
Yeah. Well, I found that I'm casting YouTube to the big screen a lot lately, and so maybe I'm part of a bigger trend there. To wrap things up, one of the big topics of this conference to date, and through the rest of it, I'm sure, is sustainability and the role of the corporation more broadly in society. P&G has made a big commitment to sustainability, and I've been covering Google a long time, and Google's been at the forefront of this. Um, as the calls grow louder for companies to take bigger, stands related to sustainability and climate, what advice would you give to leaders about how to do that and how to overcome possibly some obstacles to the near term, impact that might have on the P&L?
No, it's a great question. I think it's one of the most important issues we face. For us, particularly, we have taken a new moonshot there. We have committed by 2030 to operate 24/7 carbon free across our global operations. That means every single email, every single search, and not using offsets and so on. So I think that's what we are working on. My advice here would be it's actually an innovation opportunity, and rather than viewing it as a shift from a defensive way or something like that. Coming from the tech industry, when we think about shifts like, hey, the internet is here, you would think like, how do I capitalize on it to do newer things? Or when the shift happens from desktop to mobile, none of us would sit and say, we want to be on the desktop as long as possible. We would say mobile first, and how do we make that shift? that's how I think about sustainability. And I think my advice would be it's one of the biggest innovation opportunities. And so, for any organization which embraces it and uses it as a chance to pivot, and including changing your products in a way that will resonate with the next generation, I look at it as wow, it's one of the most disruptive, innovative opportunities, which is going to be secular in nature. And that's how we are approaching it. So, when we are thinking about how to make Google more sustainable, we're going to make cloud more sustainable, and hence we can give a platform to others. We are working with 500 cities around the world. Cities account for 70% of emissions. So we have a stated commitment to reduce emissions by 1 gigaton annually, and we are working with 500 cities around the world and providing data and solutions. So it energizes the company. I think it attracts the best talent because the talent coming in looks to sustainability as a foundational value, corporate value. So I view it as an exciting moment, and maybe that would be my advice.
Very wise advice. I'm going to throw one question at you that I know we need to wrap up, but we have a global audience, and I feel like I should just ask this since I've got the CEO of Alphabet Google with me. Are there markets or places around the world that you've noticed are really coming on? The data is coming at you, and you're saying, "Wow, this economy, this population, this region is really on the up." Have you noticed anything around the world that might provide some insight for the folks that are watching?
Yeah, obviously we've gone through a exciting phase around places like India, Brazil, and Southeast Asia. I am, thanks to new technologies, including digital payments, mobile. I think Africa really has potential ahead. When I look at places like Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, see the activity around digital payments, governments being more progressive about putting in the infrastructure. We are one of our largest sea cables going through the west of Africa, connecting the continent. And so it's something I would throw as an important, I think, because of past experiences, I think people are underestimating the potential over the next decade.
Wise words, and I wish we could talk for another 20 minutes or a couple of hours, but we'll have to leave it there. You're a busy man. Thank you so much, Sundar Pichai, for coming to Signal, and we hope to see you again here soon.
Great. Thanks for having me, John.